This morning, study at the helm, evolving together. We think about a ship in rough waters. The person that is controlling that ship, or the persons or the team, have to work together to keep us in uncharted territory. I think we're coming out of uncharted territory in some ways, but then there's other times where we have a rogue wave that hits us with things. So when we use that analogy of the ship in the water, I believe it brings us together. And so we're evolving together. We've learned, we've grown, but we're now starting to evolve the professional growth and evolving our relationships with parents, evolving public perceptions of how we do school and how we do instruction and how we provide supports. So I want to start with this first slide. Couple icebreakers here. I think parents and generally community members are receiving sort of an overwhelmed feeling at night. And so we have now come into a world in the last 18 months where the television's on, we just finished dinner, or we might be making dinner and it's 8:30, and we're thinking, what's going on? There are so many things hitting us from all sides. And so you're barely paying attention to your book, phone, show, laptop, and the crossword that you started 10 minutes ago. There's so many things that we're trying to get involved in, and it's becoming more and more difficult to bring that focus. I also think we've seen a lot of this, and this hits a lot of adults and unfortunately kids, where it uses sort of the collar around the neck to avoid looking at your phone, because we feel that we need that gratification of what's the next update. Is it a news article? Is it a breaking news? Breaking news is no longer breaking news. It's just another news topic that flashes across the bottom of the screen rather. And I know that parents and families feel this, as well as educators and those working with children. We came into the pandemic thinking, wow, we're going to learn Zoom. We're going to learn Microsoft Teams. We're going to learn what a webcam is. We're going to do all these things, Google Classroom, etc. Then we got to a point of where everybody's sort of having Zoom or online virtual meeting fatigue. At night, we're tired. Bed is good. We need to get our rest. And we're now falling down because it is exhausting to be on settings like this for hours on end. I do think some of that has dissipated this year, and it's the tail end of last year, which is very exciting to watch, because now we're starting to see more of a hybrid approach to meetings, instruction, learning situations, related services, etc. But it still gives us that reminder that self-care is important, and we need to take care of each other as we move forward. Last year, I showed this slide of faculty meeting bingo, and if you know that you've seen the muting issue. It's happened to me. It's probably happened to everyone on this call. Everyone's trying to help you to remain unmuting yourself or getting your microphone connected and such. And we go through that muting piece. But then you're still on mute and you're still trying to figure that out. And people were supporting you through that process. People were patient. But then, you know, I guess the allure of interesting background photos. Today, I've even had my IU photo off because I'm just showing you the background of my office. But most of the time, we will have our IU logo up, especially if we are in a confidential setting. We do that to mask anybody who else is in the room, or if we're singular there. And also, you see all sorts of things. I think last year we joked about pandemic hair. Because it depended upon the meeting that you would be in, of what that would look like. I did see this summer, and I thought this is really cool, because now we are in a position to survive and thrive. We're moving out of survival. We're now moving into thriving. We're growing. We're evolving our practice. And one of the things that I did love about this particular slide is it gives value to self-care and respecting yourself, and giving her the self-space and grace to be honest, and as well as give yourself the patience to make mistakes and fall down and learn from them. Especially like the try meditation and the hug yourself and talking to mentorship pieces. So here's an example of how I believe our profession is thriving. On the screen there is Dr. Becky McGee, who is actually on this call. Becky is among one of our student services coordinators. excuse me, student services supervisors. Thank you. Sorry, Becky, for that title incorrection. You see in front of you her jacket and a pair of scrubs that are sort of folded over. I believe she even put a little scrunchie at the top there of the window, a little flower. And that is the Omni robot. The WIU was a recipient of a Telepresence Robotics grant, and we continue to grow our repository of Telepresence Robotics so that we can support learners in any location and giving them that face-to-face feel. One of our first districts that we're working with right now is the Norwin School District, where we are using both an Omni robot like this one. This is a different model. And then we also have another model at that particular location, a company that's sort of evolved and gone out of business, a company called Beam. They're a rival product to the Omni. There's also a third company out there called the Double Robotics, and we have one of those doubles here at Center Ice at the IU that we use often. But the basic premise here is it looks like an iPad screen at the top. It's actually built into the Omni. We just happened to dress it up here so that Becky could drive the Telepresence robot around last week as she was unfortunately in a quarantine status around the building to interact with kids that she sees normally every day, which gave her the perspective of how to interact with children, not just with a webcam, but literally having control of how that learning or that engaging environment is going to occur. And we've used this very successfully for two things in the past. I think the pandemic has even expanded its use, both homebound instruction and also temporary placements for when a student cannot come to instruction, or we provide a synchronous learning environment from the home directly into the classroom. And those are situational, they are case-by-case bases. But when you look at this, and I did use smiley faces here so that we are honoring privacy of children, you will see that we do have children that are interacting with Becky. There's Becky smiling at them. This is actually in a classroom. It also has evolved into virtual adaptive physical education. So this is no longer the robot, but the intermediate unit recently invested in Promethean active panels for each one of our classrooms in early intervention at the Clairview School and in our Greensburg partial hospitalization facility. So about 32 classrooms across the intermediate unit now are using devices, 70-inch active panels, to provide that telepresence directly from the classroom where teachers have touch points, they can share content. So exactly what you would see in a school district, we're doing in our early childhood special education classrooms, our Greensburg partial classrooms, as well as our school-age special education classrooms, so that there is no difference in the opportunities within special education that you would see across any classroom in our county, given the school district. And so this is an example of Mr. Jeff Beard, who's actually on the left of the screen there, who was also, unfortunately, in a quarantine status for a period 2 weeks ago. The teacher on the left there is Mr. Tyler Kropelek, who's one of our teachers here at the Clairview School that was facilitating some pre-work before they jumped into adaptive physical education. So the point I'm making here is whether it's the robot, whether it's the telepresence built into an active panel, synchronous instruction is giving learners the opportunity to not miss a beat. And it's happening with natural ability instead of how do I push the button? These are people that did not know how to use robotics or how to use active panels 18 months ago. And it's become part of the vocabulary of instruction. We're fluent to it now. We understand it. We're able to provide it. And we continue to grow in this area. I also think for me personally, one of the most wonderful things I've seen around the intermediate unit and school districts is there's a lot of focus on positivity, of keeping the coaching aspect of not only employees and educators and staff motivated, but also children and learners of any age. And so these are just a few slides to show you how I've tried to capture awesome bulletin boards, which I think are so powerful. They do take time and they take creativity, but they are so powerful because they are the visceral or visual messages that children and people see in our buildings. But nobody has to say the words. You have to look, you have to feel, you have that emotional response. So this particular one I love. We may all be different fish, but in this school we swim together. I love that quote. I think that's such a cool quote. And this one was highly creative. This is much more than I know that I have the artistic ability to do. But in this particular case, those are all paper, like, I don't want to say paper mache, but like individually painted butterflies that were given there. Those are not actual butterflies. So somebody had a tremendous amount of time making those butterflies. And this is another thing that we're seeing too, with encouraging the ability to fail your way forward. It's okay to make a mistake. That's how we learn. Adults do the exact same thing the kids do. And I absolutely love, this is a little bit blurry, I know, but look at the one that says, I made a mistake. Mistakes help me improve. Tell me you haven't run into a colleague or a friend that didn't have, like, how do I turn on the camera? How do I turn on the sound? That's how we improve. The next time we know it will be that much easier and that much better to work through that. Great month, great year, great life. Gives us some chronological perspective on what we've been through. And I'm going to kick over now to, I think, the last moment of things I'd like to show you about just general accessibility. So we've talked about telepresence robotics. We've talked about technology upgrades in our classrooms. We've talked about the positivity and the creative aspects. But there are people that are at higher, maybe the word isn't higher, more detailed areas of our profession in Pennsylvania. So we'll refer to that as the Pennsylvania Technical and Training Assistance Network, so PATN. Some people say PATAN, some people say PATN. I typically say PATN. This comes out of PATN East, which is based in King of Prussia. There are 3 PATNs across the state: PATN Pittsburgh, PATN Harrisburg, and PATN King of Prussia, which is East. And this particular universal accessibility supports tool is now available to any school district or intermediate unit in Pennsylvania. If I click over to this, I hope you can still see my screen. Did my screen just flip there to, you should now see universal accessibility supports? So UAS was put together by a team at PATN. And I bring this to everyone's attention because it is possible for advocates, possible for intermediate unit personnel, as well as school district personnel, to have access to a lending library of universal accessibility supports. And when you go to this website, again, pateneast.odoo.com/shop, which will be up here on the screen in a moment, it will take you to this main accessibility store where you can click on shop, and you now have access to a lending library of all sorts of manipulatives that can be sent home with children. There are items in here such as even the telepresence robot. They are using the double. There are webcams. There are items here for specific to areas for placement of the iPad or a camera. There's even for our autism community, the VB Map assessment kit. So if districts are not familiar with that, PATN provides direct support and training for VB Map. You'll notice on our low incidence or sensory impairment group, we look at specific deaf and hard of hearing, as well as deaf blind. And just a shout out to our WIU7 deaf blind resource team. We lead a regional network of, we call it DBRT, Deaf Blind Resource Team, here in Greensburg. So we're very happy to be a part of supporting PATN through that effort. And again, there's other opportunities here for students with a visual impairment. Again, stands, different types of accessibility pieces. But this is brand new. This is something that has really been launched within the last 30 days. And it's giving people the opportunity to say, wow, I don't know what that is, but I probably could borrow that for 2 or 3 months and get that from PATN and try it out and see if I can teach myself. Or it also reciprocally gives PATN the opportunity to do a training and to guide people to a specific resource instead of them having to go and purchase it and not knowing exactly how to do that first. So this is a game changer in terms of accessibility for many reasons. And this is the last one I wanted to show you, is the assistive technology, which tons of switches, specific AT devices for sensory impairment, other items in here to support speech. There's just tremendous efforts being done to make no barriers or to cause no barriers for a learner that needs assistive technology. I will bring this back up on the screen here momentarily. It's patenteast.odoo. This will be linked on our website soon. It's a fairly new product that's pushed out there. But I did want to also show you an example to just one of these examples of how iPads are being used specifically for students with a visual impairment. Just give me a moment here. I'm going to click over to the Zoom. This is my iPad here at the office. And it's just a regular old iPad, nothing special to it. I've downloaded a few vision apps. Now, many of these applications have features that are now built into areas that are completely acceptable in business culture, such as Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office uses Microsoft Lens. And Natalie and we were talking about that earlier this morning. Microsoft Office uses a tool called Immersive Reader, which basically means you can change the size or the spacing of text for those that have a visual impairment, as well as moving things across the screen or taking the text to speech instantly, even if it's just a phrase, if you need to highlight a phrase. But I did want to demonstrate the app on the screen that you see called Seeing AI, so artificial intelligence, right? Some people will sort of refer to this as augmented reality because it's your augmented reality of how you're looking through the camera lens from the app. And you'll have some audio that will come up here, I think, on occasion, but now it's sitting here on my desk. You can see that that's my mouse, my coffee cup, and my phone. At the bottom of the screen,
short text.
Can everybody hear that as I click on it? Can you hear the audio? So basically,
document.
If I would have a visual impairment, it's giving me audio prompting for each one of these specific tools. One of the neatest things is that it will specifically, I don't know if I'm not hearing it now, if it's saying it or not.
Brown and gray. Gray and brown.
If I hover over the
brown,
it will actually tell me that it will see brown.
Brown and red.
If I go over
brown and black. White.
So it continues to show me if I am struggling with, if I say have an impairment that leads to a color deficiency, I can't see gradients of colors, this device helps me move through that. I'll click over quickly to the document scan. So you'll see that my screen may have shifted over to a blue overlay. And if I frame it here on the book, it will, if I hold this here long enough, it will take the book text directly from the iPad photo, and it's taken all of the text right off the screen. In the bottom left-hand corner, I can then hit play. That's down here. If you look in the lower left of the screen I'm sharing, and it will start to read the text to me. Now that audio is coming through my iPad. I don't know if you can hear that, but you can see it not only is reading it, it's also highlighting the word. You also can increase the size of the font, decrease the size of the font, and say, for instance, that you would need to change the speed at which the text is written. That's actually built into the iPad. iPad users can change the speed in which text is delivered, or speed it up or slow it down. So the reason I share this just as an example is I do believe the assistive technology that we've seen come out of the pandemic is absolutely now giving us less barriers on the back end than it was on the front end. People didn't know what immersive reader was. Now it's sort of in our vocabulary again of instruction of using these tools. And many of these applications are free through downloads, whether it's Google Play on a slate, or whether it's the Apple iOS store for an iPad. People are using phones. I know my parents, 82 and 83, respectively, both invested in bilateral hearing aids. My parents would not touch an iPhone, especially my dad. And now when they go to Eaton Park, they have filters that they learn to use for an app that are completely Bluetooth to their hearing aids, and they have complete accessibility to hear. As a matter of fact, they sometimes hear too well. They hear things that family members maybe are intending to not say as loud as they could. But what's amazing to me is think about the aspect of lifelong learning that has just occurred because of people seeing things now for the first time and finding a reason to implement them into their daily life. So I came back to a few of these last year, and I just want to highlight these again. I think many of these are, just want to throw them up on the screen. This is exactly the same slide I demonstrated or observed last year. And it's funny because some of those now seem to be embedded into our work culture or our learning culture or into our family culture. We don't have a lot of questions about those. It's interesting, not all of them, but this is what I think education has morphed into in terms of understanding. And coming through some of look at the last bullet on the right-hand side, order early, late, directly expected. If you've ordered from Amazon or Walmart.com or any of those sites, there's just a delay. I mean, it's just sort of what we're experiencing. So I just throw that there for perspective, not going to read down through each one of them.
Dr. Thomas, we can't see, it's not sharing.
Oh, let me go back. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
For that. Sorry about that, everyone. Let me rephrase that portion. So the full range of learnings and happenings that we observed last year, this is exactly the same slide. And what's amazing to me is how many of these are now embedded into our workplace culture, our learning culture, our home life. These are things that are happening that we really understand now. And it's only been approximately 12 to 18 months, depending upon the topic. The one item in the bottom right is, I was just saying that it's now an expectation that you, even though there might be 2-day shipping on something, because of how the world has been turned upside down in terms of logistics and shipping, we do need to plan ahead and we do need to order early. The other item on here too is, I really do believe that we are in a space where we are seeking first to understand rather than be understood. When we are engaging with parents and learners of any age level, we are understanding, we're using a strategy to understand the need in order to think of, okay, bring it back to a team, bring it back to 1 or 2 other people, whatever that team looks like. We are problem solvers. We find ways to solve problems and to support, rather than saying, well, that's not available to you anymore. Because it has taught us that, again, necessity is the mother of invention. We have a need, we've got to figure it out. It may look different on the back end, it may look radically different on the front end, but it has to be given and provided, which is something I think is, again, a learning point of the process. I also put this up last year, and I still believe it firmly, although I changed the title. We at the intermediate unit have shifted to an idea in student services about believing in each other. We have encouraged our staff to stop using pronouns that are first person or non-inclusive, in the sense that we're talking about we and our. It's our team, it's our leadership. We work together rather than my team. No one is owned in student services by Matt Thomas. That is not how it works. It opens the doors to all of our leaders, whether they are supervisory, whether they're classroom, whether they're speech therapists, anywhere where they work, they're classroom assistants, to embrace the notion of leadership at all levels. If you have a way to solve a problem, shout it from Laurel Mountain, tell everyone about it, and have us help you evolve that idea and to see how that makes things better. So when we look at this, I do think sometimes we have, even people have reminded me, the third bullet point is definitely key to this. We do have to encourage calm, because it can be overtaxing and you're trying to solve problems. Your brain's working on overdrive and you have to come back to say, all right, get poised, relax. There will be a problem. You'll sleep on it, whatever that's going to be, as long as it's not an emergency. Clearly, we are finding solutions to those problems through poise. I bring this back up because this has been our logic model since March of 2020. We believe in kids. We believe in leadership and learning at all levels. And if you look at that as optimal supports, special education practice is premised on those 5 areas. It's a service, not a place. FAPE, free and appropriate public education. We provide equity, and we do everything within our power to promote and provide equity. That's the key point. And when we see that, we call out that there is an equity, and we try to provide a space where there is equity. Access, I think we're doing much better than that than a year ago. Access at first was a little rough at the beginning of the pandemic, quite frankly, and I feel that we do have more access to that. and at all times and in all places, presume competence. Absolutely presume competence. So when we think about that logic model, it transitions into this one. And this is another holdover from last year. Real quickly, we as an intermediate unit, and I think in practice across the county, we serve 17 school districts and a charter school. So we can't just be centric to one tool, such as Google Meet. We have to also be fluent in Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom. We have to be fluent in Edgenuity versus some of our online learning platforms in the e-Academy program that we support our school districts. We have to be able to use all of the tools depending upon the district's notion. And so when you talk to our staff, I think they're rock stars at being able to move around and to see, okay, this student's going to connect via Microsoft Teams because you're an X school district. Here's how we do that. Okay, this student's going to connect in Zoom because you're in another school district. It changes. And keep in mind, we provide services to students even beyond our school districts. We have many of our own operated programs where these are varied settings as well. Key point on this slide, I believe when we started in March of 2020 on this journey, there was a lot of asynchronous focus. I believe as you shift to the right of the screen, there's much more an emerging synchronous focus for learning and instruction. So to sort of come down to the end here, I do want to take a moment and focus on who are we? Who is we? Who are we? And that includes everyone. And in our scope, that's birth to 3, early child preschool, school age, young adult, learners that teach, learners that lead, learners that observe. So even if I'm not leading or teaching actively, I'm observing and I'm watching and I'm growing from that observation. And I think it's very key to also look at our larger community. We have a lot of people, grandparents, intergenerational communities within, look at my own in-laws, supporting my 6th and 8th grader, even though they're not experts at any of the technology. Sometimes Grammy and Pop-Pop have to learn how to engage on a math worksheet. And now they're seeing that in Google Classroom as they didn't 2 years ago. So I say retired, but not retired in terms of not available, retired in terms of their post-career. They've done that career. They've raised children, and now they're helping that intergenerational support to support all of our efforts in public ed. And these are just some samples of how are we growing? Well, just these are purely for conjecture of this team that's listening today. Maybe a majority of IEP meetings will be permanently involved into virtual meetings. Not all, but maybe a majority of them. It's convenient for team members to join those meetings virtually and to be heard and have equity in that process, just as if they had to physically drive to a location. We'll see how that goes. There are advantages. Speech language is one area. There are advantages to not having a mask on when you're by yourself with good audio and video. Children can see your mouth. And that is another thing that I know has helped. I think I used an example last year of we had a student with that required autism support that is now moving from a nonverbal perspective to a completely verbal perspective as they had to do one-on-one focus on the teacher. We have an obligation to keep kids physically in school. There, I said it. We do. We have to do everything with our power to keep those environments safe and healthy. And we're going to keep doing that. We're just going to keep at it. And I think it goes in the next one. In order to do that, we have to keep faculty and staff healthy as well. That's key. And I know people have moved a lot of mountains to be very good with physical distancing, with masking, with any sort of other precautions necessary. The last two talk about self-efficacy. I believe that we are seeing students that are seeing what is possible, what they can do, rather than what they're told to do. And finally, I have to, some people call it the new normal. I just now call it the newest normal, because what was new 6 months ago is now new again in some cases, depending upon whether it's a meeting position, whether it's technology, whether it's regulatory language. And so those success markers continue to evolve. I love the attitude that I'm seeing among parents that learning is possible anytime. Learning is possible outside of the school day, and because of the technology supports that we're providing, it does come down to mindset and motivation. And I believe this is attributed to Nietzsche. This is my next to last bullet. If you believe in the what, we can figure out any how. It's not my quote. I actually believe it's attributed to Nietzsche originally in some other context. But if you know what you want to do, we'll figure it out. It might take us a while to get there, but we will figure it out together. And I do believe in the last portion here is the decisions that started to happen after March 2020 will be with us for a lifetime in public ed. It will, and private education and non-public education. It is carved a new landscape for what learning is available to kids and to adult learners. The way we do professional development now for our own staff looks very differently than it did 2 years ago. Much of it is self-directed. And a lot of it is subscription based, where they might be learning for 30 minutes on a very specific topic, whereas they had to wait for an in-service day to get that topic in a small group setting. And so we continue to evolve in that. And I think it goes to very much to be said on bullet point 4. Even in times of disagreement, we hope to find consensus. If we stay apart, nobody is able to move forward. But if we come to the middle and we find consensus, not everyone's going to get what they want, but everyone could get what they need to be successful. And the key point there is, I heard this in a meeting last week. This is purely, again, conjecture. Perhaps civic education should be a requirement. Civics education, learning about how to engage alternate perspectives and use that as a superpower in order to get to an answer, could have tremendous opportunities. So that's not a platform statement. And there might be social studies teachers across the nation or giving me a shout out, but I'm not a social studies teacher. I just embrace the notion of why we need to build things together and to bring people to understanding and consensus. And I do believe that the convenience of virtual meetings and virtual professional learning just continues to grow and will continue to grow beyond, hopefully when the pandemic is tapped down a bit. So I'm going to end today with a slide that I used last year. This still resonates with me no matter how I look at it, because if we kept a ship in the harbor, if we continued to not carve out a new landscape for public education, private education, special education, curriculum instruction, and leadership and all of that, we wouldn't get anywhere. It would just simply stay in the harbor. So the ship is out on the water. I hope we're moving even at times towards more charted territory because we understand it. And my final visual for everyone, the summit is what drives us, but the climb itself is what matters. We know that we want to get to the summit. We know we want to understand things, but it's that journey and process, I believe, that we bring people together and understanding each other, as well as when they take the journey. Imagine this in the context of parents that are high school age advising parents of children that are in preschool. They've been there, done that. They understand it. They understand how to support and build that consensus with each other. So I believe very much in our processes. And I want to thank everyone for everyone on this call that you do for children and on behalf of children. And want to thank again, Natalie and Melissa for inviting me to speak today. Thank you so much.